Happy Monday. Today we are going to continue on with Unit 2, talking about understanding healthcare safety and infection control procedures. But today we're going to be moving on to emergency procedures and environmental safety. We've started touching on environmental safety last week, and we're going to continue on with that, talking about different symbols that you're going to see around healthcare facilities that let you know what is safe, what is not. And we're going to talk about those safety data sheets that I mentioned last week in some further detail. So the first thing to remember when it comes to emergency procedures is that you are wanting to provide a safe environment for yourself and others, and you always want to follow your agency's procedures and, most importantly, to stay calm. When handling spills, the first thing you want to do is get that material safety data sheet, MSDS or SDS. It used to be called an MSDS, and some places still call it that, but the most recent terminology is just SDS. And this is a sheet that you have to keep nearby all of your hazardous materials and chemicals to let you know what that chemical does, what it reacts with, how you're supposed to use it, how you're supposed to clean it up, how it's supposed to be stored, and what to do in case of an emergency related to an illness or an injury caused by that material. It lists all of the special cleaning procedures and how to dispose of the product, and you need to follow that SDS to a T when you're handling hazardous materials that you're unfamiliar with. You should also always report any spill to your supervisor just in case it were to ever be an issue later down the road so that they know about it. And if you got anything on you and you got it in a cut or you got burned from anything, you always want to make sure that you receive the appropriate first aid. When dealing with blood and body fluids, you have to remember all of that information from your BBP, making sure that you're using the proper PPE. The first thing is to wash or flush out the area with water. Next, you're going to want to report that exposure to your supervisor because, again, you don't know what kind of viruses, pathogens, or anything like that could be in that blood or body fluid that you don't want to get it in your system and cause you to get sick. You also need to discuss with your facility's exposure control manager, and they'll let you know what the next steps will be. In some cases, you may have to go and get tested for a certain pathogen, or you may need to receive some further first aid. And then follow the appropriate post-exposure treatment according to your facility. If you were to get a foreign substance or foreign body in the eye, do not remove the object. You could cause more damage this way. Seek immediate medical attention and then eventually notify your supervisor. If you get chemical injury to the eye, you're going to have to rinse out your eye with copious amounts of water. Typically, they make you stand or look over that little eye wash station for 2 minutes. Seek immediate medical attention again and notify your supervisor. Anytime you have any type of injury or illness, especially to the eyes, you have to let your supervisor know. It is your responsibility that if you have, it is not your responsibility, it's your employer's responsibility to have an illness and injury prevention plan. We talked about that last week when we covered OSHA and talked about what is expected to follow OSHA compliance. You have to have that prevention plan in place. You also have to provide training regarding the plans and provide safety equipment for the employees. So that would be things like PPE, sharps containers, if you work in construction, a harness, a hard hat, different types of equipment that is necessary for that type of worker to keep themselves safe. It is your responsibility as an employee to make sure that you are always using products as directed, that you always understand the potential hazards. If it's a chemical or a medication that you've never worked with before, you should always read the directions 3 times just to make sure that you really understand how to use it. You should always store products and equipment properly in the right temperature, make sure it's a dry space, and that they're stored in a way that they're not going to cause any issues with any other chemicals. And you also need to make sure that you have the right immunizations on file and know that you have the right to get other immunizations if you are a high-risk exposure within the first 10 days of work. So, for example, most employers are required by law to offer you the hepatitis B vaccine because you're going to be potentially exposed to hepatitis B while working in healthcare. So you have the opportunity to go get that Hep B vaccine. Most of you have probably already received it, but if you have not, then you have the right to go get that and it be paid for by your employer. Some general guidelines when it comes to environmental safety is just making sure that you read and understand all the policy and procedure manuals and never operate any equipment unless you've been properly trained to do so. For example, one of those lifts that we showed last Thursday, you should not be using one of those lifts to move a patient if you have not received the proper training, because you could accidentally not strap them in correctly or not use it right and drop them or injure someone. Also, never use any electrical equipment near water. Hopefully you already know that without me telling you this, but please make sure that if you're in a hospital and you're plugging in something, that you just check the floor in the surrounding area to make sure there's no standing water, and observe all safety precautions and signage, which we're going to be talking about in a little bit. Other general guidelines are to make sure that you maintain a safe, clean area and orderly work environment. The cleaner you keep your area, the safer it's going to be. And if you see something that doesn't look right or looks like it could be a potential hazard, it's always okay to go ahead and just call EVS or call your supervisor and see if you can get that taken care of. Frequently check for safety hazards in patient and visitor areas. Remember that there are waiting rooms and things that you need to check, as well as patient rooms. And always report any unsafe situation. Again, it's better to just go ahead and call someone and let them know about it, even if it seems minor, than to let it go and think, oh, it's no big deal, and then it becomes a big deal because someone slips and falls, or someone trips, or someone gets hurt. Talking about hazardous materials, your employer must always inform you as the employee of any types of chemicals or hazards that could be potentially in the workplace. Hazardous materials include things like liquids, chemicals, and even some equipment. Handling liquids, it's always important, like I said, to read the label at least 3 times and to never mix solutions. You don't know what kind of reactions might happen between those 2 different chemicals, so it's better off to just leave them separate. Also, you should always store solutions in a locked cabinet or a locked closet. Typically in hospitals, there's a specific room where these types of things are kept, and it's usually behind either a key or you have to use like a PIN code to get in. Now let's talk about safety symbols and signs. There are many different types of safety symbols and signs you might see in a hospital. The first one we're going to be talking about is biohazard. And this is a sign that is posted to mark anything that might be contaminated or contain infectious pathogens. The most common places you'll probably see biohazard symbols are on biohazard trash bags, which is what we use to put linens that are soiled or bloody towels or anything like that. We put them in biohazard bags to let you know that they have some type of contaminated pathogen on them. And the other thing you'll see is biohazard signs on sharps containers. So like those containers that you stick used needles and razors and stuff in, those will have biohazard labels on them as well. The next one is this symbol here, which is found on radiation treatment areas and x-ray facilities. So this is a symbol to let you know that there is radiation involved in that area and to be careful not to be in that area for too long. This next one is a little tag. It's a paper tag that we put on equipment after that equipment has become damaged or is considered dangerous. And so we put that tag on there to let others know that they should not be using that equipment. And we usually have to go and put in a work order for someone to come and remove the piece of equipment or to repair it. The next sign also says danger, but this one has a picture of a cigarette with an X over it, because this one means that someone is using oxygen and that there should be no smoking or open flame nearby. This is common in hospital rooms because pretty much in every single hospital room behind the hospital beds in the wall is a port that leads directly to oxygen tanks. So if someone is being hooked up to oxygen or they have an oxygen tank, you definitely don't want to be lighting a cigarette in that room because those 2 things could mix and it would not end well. Oxygen mixed with an open flame will lead to an explosion. This next one is a hazardous materials sign. This is the type of sign which would indicate that personal protective equipment should be worn before entering a specific area. It can also be used to indicate that there might be specific safety hazards or hazardous materials in use. So if you see this sign, it typically means you need to put on the gown, gloves, mask, and goggles before entering. This type of sign says warning biohazard in different colors, And this one is placed in highly contaminated areas that should only be entered by specifically trained individuals who also are wearing the proper PPE equipment.
Hey, I just wanted to jump in here real quick and clarify something that I feel like I didn't do a good job of clarifying in the original video. So this symbol, the warning with the biohazard symbol that's yellow and black, it's a little different than the normal biohazard symbol. It actually means isolation. So if someone is considered an isolation patient, meaning they have a really highly communicable or infectious disease that could be easily transmitted to another patient or employee, they are in these special isolation rooms. And typically those rooms are like a door that you walk in to a room that's sealed off, and then this would be the door to the patient's room. And so then in that little room is where you would put on all of your proper PPE. Then you would close the door behind you, go into the patient's room, do whatever you need to do, and then when you come back out, you stay in that little like entrance way. You remove all your PPE, you scrub down, you make sure that everything is sterile in that environment, and then you exit. And this is a way to try to prevent transmission of disease. So the warning biohazard in the yellow and black, that one is actually an isolation room warning.
Now, talking about an MSDS sheet or SDS sheet, these are material safety data sheets. These are required by OSHA to identify a product, list the precautions, give instructions on how to use it, the procedures for cleaning up and disposing of the material if it were to be spilled, and the emergency care instructions if you were to be injured by that material. There's usually a big binder, looks like this one in the picture here, full of different SDS sheets for all the different chemicals in that facility or in that room. So you always need to read one of these if you are unsure about how to use a product, or if you were to spill something and you need to clean it up, you can read this first. That is everything for today. You now have a symbols scavenger hunt that you're going to go do to make sure that you understand all of the different precautionary signage and you know what each one means. And then you also have a material safety data sheet assignment where you're going to actually be using something from inside your home and creating an MSDS sheet for that product. So that is it. I hope you all have a great day. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on email or on Remind. Bye, guys.